Welcome back to DrJLT Economics. Today I want to talk about AI for propaganda. And this is the first part of a couple of posts that I'm going to write on the subject of tech for evil. Now, technology is something that is neutral. A lot of people like to think technology as something that is inherently good. And what I would say is that technology inherently can be used for good. But there are always people who are more cynical if you think of the entire population on a spectrum of being on the one hand, being more amicable or more generous, whereas on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, more cynical, more sinister, then there are always this type of people who, when equipped with technological know-how, will use technology for evil. This has happened throughout history, and perhaps is very evident in the invention of weapons of mass destruction, not just in terms of nuclear weapons, but also chemical and biological weapons. Now today, technology is undoubtedly at the forefront of armament between or among some of the most militaristic countries. And beyond that, a lot of corporations, multinational corporations, are fighting each other and fighting for their power, and they are using technology in ways that are not necessarily for the good of the human civilization, for democracy, for freedom, or whatever positive concept that that you can think of. Instead, technology is being used, and I believe will continue to be used, for evil. So in this context, I think it can be quite interesting to discuss a couple of subjects that I see that in this decade is going to be two of the most decisive issues in our society, and for countries where there are institutions of democracy, also for democracy. And these, as far as I can see, are one, AI for propaganda, and two, VR, or some people say XR, for dehumanization. I'll leave the second to another post, based on which I will have another video or podcast. But today's podcast will be based on the first subject, which is AI for propaganda. First of all, to begin with, of course, this is based on the post that I've written on my own blog, and just as the post, I want to start with a disclaimer, which is to say that I'm not making any accusations. I'm not saying that any government or any company is actively seeking to do this. I'm not saying that any country, government, or any corporation is looking into doing this. And I certainly am not saying that any government or any corporation already possess the mature technologies and perhaps have already deployed models that are doing this. I'm only discussing a possible danger And I see that as technology continues to mature in an AI, it is very difficult to, at least for me, to see a situation where across the world, not a single AI for propaganda is devised. On the contrary, I see that it will be something that is quite similar to tanks or airplanes or bombs, that there will be countries who countries, governments, and corporations who will be sooner in implementing these, and some people will be a bit late, or will be later. But I think a lot of this type of AI systems will be implemented because it is possible. And with this, because there is this possibility, because there is this ability, a lot of people will look to do exactly this. And why is it that it is in this decade that I think it is this type of system will be implemented? Well, it is because AI systems need data. There are usually, in general, there are two ways of implementing AIs. One is more traditional AIs, which are rules-based. They are based on concepts that are programs that are rules that are programmed by experts, right? But these are, as I write in this article, they are analogous to switches and relays in electric circuitry, and also valves, vacuum lines, vacuum tanks, etc. in a mechanical system or in a vacuum system, or even, no, I wouldn't say gears, but you know where what I'm referring to. This type of rules-based systems can be quite efficient. They do not need a lot of, they do not need really training. They really only depend on the knowledge of the designer. But herein lies the problem. The designer must know how to distinguish the different, must know the rules. You need to know the rules before you can write the rules. So this is number one. And secondly, writing the rules is only possible if the situation that you want to model is easily tractable. And by this I mean that there are not a lot of variables to consider, because as the number of inputs or branches increase, the amount of code increases astronomically, right? It's an exponential growth. So it is very, it's not realistic to build complex systems. And in order to implement good propaganda, we need to have sophisticated models on human behavior. This has been a very hot topic in the last, I would say, half century, especially in recent decades, with the emphasis on neuroscience, which basically involves a lot of experiments that help us understand how the human brain works. That combined with, right, so we have some good understanding of how the human brain works, but only, I think so far, mostly in laboratory environments. Now, combined with modern ways using technology to collect the data, it is possible, it is increasingly feasible to have this type of real-world live experiments. And this is the perfect one because usually when you conduct an experiment, the difficult part is always to have control. Right? You need to have a control group, and you need to have an experiment group. With real-world events, and when you can have very granular data on what kind of information a person is exposed to, how this person reacts to each single piece of information, how this person, when reacting to this information, what's the person's physiological states, and so on and so forth. With these information all collected, you are essentially having live experiments that help, that can make it very much really empowering researchers to understand human behavior in ways that really scientists of previous generations simply cannot imagine. With this, and additionally, with AI, what you can also do is to even let go of those rules-based models that old school academics like to think about, like their hypotheses, their theories. But instead, you can build statistical models with, in many cases, really hundreds of thousands of parameters, right? You can build deep neural networks that really help you understand predict how humans will behave. And this is a great tool for marketers. It is a great tool for marketers because it will help them really, find the correct angle to sell a certain product or service to the individual on whom you have a good amount of data, a good understanding of the person's of this person's preferences, good understanding, actually a better understanding of this person overall than this person does or forever or ever will be able to understand. And this basically means that you can manipulate the person in whatever way that suits your commercial interests. And this leads me to the last section, right? So that's commercial interest. It can be a little bit of malevolent, right? If we think about people who use information that they collect without the subject's knowledge, right? Even though with their consent, you take their information, you use your complex models, your AI, and then you predict how exactly the person will think. You can even build these reinforcement learning algorithms for each single individual over time, such that you can, by the end of it, you can convince the person that the person is hallucinating. You can convince the person that the sky is red, because for whatever reason, perhaps because you can convince the person that this person has always been lied to. You can convince this person that that other people are wrong to say that the sky is blue, or maybe you can convince the person that what he or she thinks is blue is actually red. Whatever that, however that means, this type of model will be able to understand the person so thoroughly that it will be able to manipulate the person's mind. And this is where the danger comes, right? This is where it is exceptionally dangerous, right? So in other words, at the beginning, at the initial stages, it will be just targeted marketing and so on. That's okay. I'm sorry. But exactly when do you stop? If there is no strong, as I mentioned in my previous podcast, if there is no strong institutions that protect people's freedom, that protect people's liberty, if we let some unhinged, sinister individuals loose, these people will build these algorithms, they will implement them, and they will manipulate the population. And at the end of it, people will no longer want freedom because they will think that freedom is slavery. They will think being slaves are free. This is where it's so dangerous. And of course, people in power, what are they going to do? Some people who are reckless, sinister, they will use this type of systems for their own agendas. That's the traditional sense of propaganda. And they will fight wars, they will lead nations into wars, they will destroy the planet, and they can do whatever they want simply because, you know, maybe because the person is born with a sociopathic disorders, right? Maybe just because the person is a sociopath, that the person has problems in the head, and that alone is enough reason for people to do a lot of harm. And so what can we do? I don't think there's a lot we can do except to build strong institutions. Strong institutions that act as checks on people, on big corporations and governments who are exploring to build these type of systems. And I mentioned a few ways that they are collecting data. Of course, smartphones, one of the most dangerous, insidious inventions of the last 20 years. It is constantly listening, constantly monitoring, constantly reporting. This data in the hands of a few means that these few people can potentially have power, more power than those with nuclear weapons. And of course, then there is the social media. It's less dangerous. People like to bash social media. I think social media is less dangerous. And then there's search engines and web browsers. I think they are also quite dangerous, but less dangerous still. Really the most dangerous, in my judgment, is smartphone. But of course, I could be wrong. Now, I don't think we should stop using smartphones and these services. I think these technologies are not inherently evil. Rather, it is using these technologies to collect data and storing data and building models on the stored data that is dangerous. Some models can be built if it is to improve people's lives, if it's tech for good, But it is very difficult to, if it's basically impossible to foresee the consequences of these models. Even if a model is initially construed or maybe conceived to do good, it could have implications that are not fully foreseen. Given this, I think it is essential, it is very important for strong institutions to be built and for checks to be enforced to prevent, whether it is government or it is big corporations, big tech firms, from collecting and storing such comprehensive data, because it is always dangerous if you give people the possibility to do bad, to do evil. Some of them will. It's just like spreading plutonium, uranium, and other things, and spreading it to all the terrorist groups, and hope that no one comes up with a nuclear bomb. That is obviously insane, but I think internationally there needs to be strong institutions that prevent this type of AI for propaganda from being implemented. Now, of course, some people may suggest that certain tech companies and some countries may already have some this type of system in some form. I don't know whether this is true or not. I don't want to make any accusations, right? But as I said at the end of this blog post, people who, when this type of systems are implemented, most people will not be able to see that they have been propagandized. Why? Because the system is supposed to work. A fully functional AI for propaganda, I believe, will work so well that most people will not feel like they are propagandized. They will feel that the company whose service that they are addicted to are the most angelic organization in the world, that the government who has brainwashed them are really champions for whatever great value that they believe in, whether it is democracy, freedom, or gender equality, environmental rights, or whatever. Right? A government will then be able to deploy nuclear weapons, threaten nuclear wars, while at the same time pretend to be green. That is when that happens, well, I'm sorry to say that you will probably not be able to see it. You will think that it is natural, that it is right, and the very few people who will still be able to see through this, I think they will be labeled conspiracy theorists and domestic terrorists. And of course, I think they will be removed and they will be disappeared. Not necessarily physically, but from the metaverse, which leads me to the next next article that I will write, which is VR for dehumanization. And that, I think, of course, as I alluded to, is about the metaverse. It is exceptionally dangerous, even though, just like AI, I think the metaverse, if used in a constructive way, can help build mutual understandings across civilizations. There are so many great potentials. But guess what? The big corporations who have the financial resources to implement it, and the governments who are most susceptible to these ideas, are exactly the ones who are the most greedy, sinister, and authoritarian. I'll just leave it at this, and I hope that this subject is not too depressing. I hope that people who happen to listen to this podcast will think at least for themselves how to protect themselves from at least being manipulated, perhaps at least commercially, right? If you live in a democracy, if everyone has been brainwashed to believe in a certain way, there is really nothing you can do. So it is something that you can prevent. Perhaps it's still not too late, but if that happens, there's nothing you can do. But at least you can protect yourself financially. All right, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and have a great day.